Welcome everybody to another Ziti TV. It is not Friday when I'm recording this. We are going off the book today, people. So we have Meade Kincke with us here today. Hi, Meade. And
Hello.
we have Ken, as usual. And Meade here, he is... this is the wrong slide. All right, this is why live is so good. All right, this is the right slide. This is the right slide. And Meade here is with Imperfektus. Did I say it right?
You have it absolutely correct.
Fantastic. All right. And Meade and Ken have been going back and forth in the discourse for, let's see now, since September. Let's make this comically large so that everybody can read it. Since September of 2023 was
one man's journey.
one man's journey. That is for sure.
It all starts with the query of, how do I do this?
Yeah, for sure. So
Oh
Ken, if you don't know, has been busy working on Kubernetes type work. And so when the Helm port mappings question popped into the discourse, you can bet your bottom dollar. I said, hey, Ken, we're going to need some help on this one. Can you go out here and help out? Or Ken might have just jumped right in because it was Kubernetes related. But I mean, it's over a year ago now. So I don't know how it happened. But I have been
trying to remember myself.
I ask a lot of queries. I'll say it that way.
Yeah,
I
well,
think this
that's
just
what the
became
forums
like
are
your
for.
little slice of the forum, and we just everything that we talked about happened there, which is convenient now for like reviewing it.
I also, you have a whole lot of practical to you like, how do we do? Just go look at that Meade thread. Just over there.
Yeah, for sure. And so this went back and forth and 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 back and forth. So let's see, we're in October now. We're still in October.
Figure it out? Did we eventually figure it out?
Yes.
Awesome.
Well,
That's we are here to be able to expose the the facts of the matter.
We can compress it down to nuggets of wisdom.
Right? Look at there. Look at that's nice. Discourse gives you a nice little view here. So October. Oh, did you pop? Oh, it seems like you popped away for approximately a year and popped back in October. Cool. Yeah, look at that. It's been a while.
It's been a thing of like, okay, pause on this, figure this out. What's the problem with this? Oh, there we go. Now we're back.
Well, that's cool. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we like to see. And so, you know, we were talking, well, not we, but I think you and Philip were probably talking. And one of the things we like to do on Ziti TV is to have users on and to tell us, well, you know, what's so great about OpenZiti or what's not so great about OpenZiti, how they're using OpenZiti, what their experience has been like. We already know the experience with respect to support from Ken has been astonishing and glowing.
Phenomenal.
So it's
absolutely phenomenal.
Not surprised, not surprised. So what sorts of things are you doing with OpenZiti? Like what brought you to OpenZiti? How did you find the project?
Yeah, like the whole thing about it is it all starts with like, I speak at security conferences. I wear a pretty hefty tinfoil hat. And, you know, in the world of the attack surfaces, you look at, oh, well, you can't pick out what you can't see, you know, so enter the world of VPNs and you go, great, let's do this. Which competing format, like much goes the XKCD comic of like, great, now we have 17 competing standards. And it's always the thing of, okay, I get that this is sort of what's being done, but it's probably not the best way to do things. So when you start thinking of like, okay, let's use, you know, WireGuard, and you go, well, it's a wonderful, effectively like secure backdoor. So if you want to give, you know, a cluster, if you're talking Kubernetes or any kind of infrastructure access, you do, but you give it carte blanche, you know. So when you look at that and you go,
and when you say carte blanche, just for everybody who may not be aware, I think what you mean is every port is available.
You're inside the, like you get inside the castle beyond the moat. And once you're in, all the doors are open. They don't even have doors. It's just portals. You can just walk through everything. And the big thing is, it's always, it's a backwards design. You know, when you think about, okay, I have like, say, sysadmins, or I have these engineers or whatever that need access to these things, but maybe they don't need access to this. So with something like a traditional VPN, you're always on the back foot going, did I take away access, as opposed to explicitly giving it out? It's almost like, you give a night janitor a big ring of keys and you go, actually, you only needed one of those. I need to take that back.
Right.
and you go, did I remember to take back 307 keys? And you go, no, I didn't. Oh, no. Which one is it? Oh, we moved that service over here. So it becomes a nightmare and it becomes untenable. And you have like a hodgepodge mess of, network rules and IP tables, this and so on. And it's always just trying to kind of capture something that you go, this is impossible. And sure, it has things like it's baked into the Linux kernel and it's there and it's everywhere, but that doesn't mean that it's good. It just means that it's good enough. And I started kind of analyzing that, going like, there must be a better way to do this. There must be some kind of cleaner fashion where I can give something explicit access and nothing more. And did some digging, like, end up on like Reddit threads, and you end up in self-hosted and people go, have you heard of this quiet little project? And I go, no, no, I haven't. So then the reading began, and I looked at it and I'm going, this is brilliant. Now, how do I use it?
Sure.
So that was the journey. And, the thing about it is like what we're using it for. We have a number of different branches at Imperfektus, and something that we have upcoming is executive transport. It's called the Envelope. And, everyone has seen the private chat. That's all well and good. But the thing that we're bringing to the table is the way we describe it is executive transport for those who value security. And it's everything end to end. And we can get into more details as that's kind of revealed. But when you think about locations and people involved and things that should be absolutely never seeing the light of day, that's what we're using, like one particular example. And at this point, it's actually used in tandem with a traditional VPN, in case we do need that full-blown door swung open, just give me everything. But that's kind of a oh no handle, if you will, where you go, okay, I just need everything, just give me everything, I don't care. But for users and for maintenance and everything else, here's the thing, and it's super easy. And like beautiful things, like you can just send someone a QR code and they go, great, I don't need to think about this. And anyone that's ever used things like WireGuard, that it's a nightmare of like, oh, well, let me send you this. And I need to, which public key certificate is it? Is it this one? Does that work? It's never fun. It's never a fun endeavor.
WireGuard's great for a few things, but once you get past a few things, it gets...
Oh, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
Just a
for
nightmare.
Sure. And so you showed up into the forum looking for Helm support. So you're deploying this into Kubernetes.
Correct.
How are you using it in Kubernetes? Like, are you using it to give people access to certain resources in Kubernetes? Or do you have APIs that go in between? Do you have multiple clouds? How do you use it?
Yeah. So everything that we have, we actually don't use public cloud service. So this is all on self-hosted Metal. And again, going back to the pretty hefty tinfoil hat, that's just sort of my background and how we operate. So, again, thinking about, okay, we have someone that want to book something. Here is your user account, and here's something that you have access to, this web service and nothing more. Or maybe, we have things like internal communications that these members need access to where they can chat to each other and arrange calls and do business. All of that is kind of able to be doled out at will. And as you all know, and I'll elaborate to the viewers in the crowd, the wonderful thing about giving access is there's no reload, there's no this. You just smack yes on something, and then as long as people are connected, they have everything that they need, which is, it's kind of like a superpower. That much from here you go, and you go, well, what do I need to do? Nothing. Like it's just there.
Well, that's really cool. So have you automated the deployment of identities to individuals? Like, how do your users... Oh, yeah, cool.
Yeah. So as far as all of that, like being able to use things like the the ZT binary to, you can have all, like, the way that we have it operated is kind of when someone is brought on, you get this and this and this as kind of like a base, and then depending on what needs to be shaped, we can add on extra services and so on, depending on what they need and what they want. But yeah, being able to automate it, again, using the CLI, it's a lifesaver, because again, when you talk about small things and only a few services, like as far as what we have running internally, it's upwards of 50 like custom services across the board, which is
Neat.
more than it's more than a few. So when you think like, okay, I have like, if you think of someone just kind of playing around and just running something small, you go, okay, 3 services. You can go into a web UI and click and do and all of that. But when you're talking about 50 plus services with bunch of users, no, the CLI is the only way to go with it.
That's cool. And for those who are interested, there's also a whole REST API if you want to say use your own favorite scripting language or your own favorite programming language or whatever. I personally use the ZD CLI all the time. It does use that REST endpoint and does most of the things that you can do in the REST endpoint. We have to enable the functionality in the CLI in order for it to be there. So sometimes the CLI does lag behind the actual API a tiny bit.
I haven't had any experiences where it's not performed the way it's supposed to. Maybe I'm not doing something like weird or
that's usually what it is. It's usually
how do I do something I shouldn't do?
Well, no, it's usually some one of those more esoteric type of functionalities that's just not there. Generally speaking, we do a good job of making sure the ZD CLI stays up to date with the REST API, but every once in a while you'll find a missing flag that snuck in that hasn't been, it wasn't there in the first rev of the API and then got added on. And so little things like that do sneak in here and there. That's cool.
Sure.
Well, that's really interesting stuff. Here's where, if we could talk about the actual Imperfektus company, you could put a little scroll, show us the website. So now, for those of us who are familiar with Ziti TV, you know that it's a relatively, it's not very professional. Let's just say it's just a couple guys having chats, or
I'm all about
guys.
that. That's wonderful.
Yeah, but not this time, right? So Meade here says he's going to spice up this Ziti TV. So ready? So maybe flame or stars or
maybe something.
Maybe a rainbow that pops up on the good ideas. I'm really looking forward to how you cut this together. I don't have any creative control. Meade's going to do it all for us.
There's a lot of trust on this table.
I can't wait. Well, it's funny you mentioned the trust. I hope that was a pun. I really appreciated it if it was.
I'm not trying, but I think the jokes write themselves today. I think that's just sort of where we are.
Well, that one was money.
But right, cool. I need someone give me a hi-hat. Come on now.
Well, again, in post, we got post, right? We got sound effects. Come on.
Insert drum kit.
That's right. That's right. So cool. And now in the Discourse forum post, were you just trying, or maybe Ken, you can answer this question. Was it just how do I helm, or was it your helm chart is busted, or what was the back and forth like?
What I can say is I kind of, everything sort of starts prototyping with like, oh, great, here's a Docker Compose. And you go, great, I can get this up and running, whatever it may be. And then it's like, okay, how do I use this in a real fashion? How do I get like things like real certificates? How do I get this to where this is battle ready? How do I make sure that it does what it's supposed to do? And kind of the proof of concept of like, great, spun up a Docker Compose, it works. Where do we go from now? And I, again, kind of doing the thing of, this is my usual of like, oh, great, let's do things that we haven't done before. Where, it normally runs on just like a HTTPS port. I'm going, well, let's do this a little bit differently. How about we have it running non-standard and having it run in tandem with, WireGuard, a traditional VPN, for the reasons I've mentioned. And that was sort of the shaping of the suit of making things bespoke of, okay, well, that's different and whatnot. But yeah, if can you have your end of the conversation, by all means, to chime in. Like, this madman came and started talking at me.
Yeah, so Ken, how did it go for you? What do you recall of that conversation?
Well, the impression I felt immediately like Meade was a power user, and he was using things that either hadn't been written yet or had just recently been written and maybe never used together. Just as an example, I think Meade was the first user that came in asking for help using traffic with Kubernetes. Traffic is another load balancer. Like, I had done most of my testing with either the traffic that comes with K3s or Ingress Nginx, which is the Nginx load balancer from the Kubernetes project. So I had to level up a bit on how to traffic and how to traffic at the intersection of traffic and Kubernetes. Traffic spelled traffic.
Traffic, yeah.
Yeah, but it's traffic. And then I realized that just to continue that one example, that the traffic load balancer had front run the gateway API's concepts of a TCP route and implemented their own CRDs because Ingress wasn't good enough. It was just awkward for certain things.
Can you just put a pin in that real quick, Ken?
Yeah,
because
sure,
I don't know what you just said.
I'll elaborate.
CRDs I got, but you
Yeah.
said it front run the TCP.
I was trying to express that while Gateway API was working on fixing the problems of Ingress, Gateway is like Ingress v2 for Kubernetes. And while they were working on that, traffic didn't just sit around and wait, and they decided not to go the route that Ingress Nginx went, which is to annotate all the things. They went ahead and they filled the gap. They
had their they made their own implementation ahead of Gateway API because they didn't want to wait. I see.
What it is, there are two custom CRDs. One is Ingress root TCP and UDP, and you have total control over, like, if you wanted to do something like, oh great, let's give traffic access to SSH. And it'll handle all of that kind of stuff back and forth, where you do have a lot of limitation otherwise.
Yeah. So, like, the most concrete example is that Ziti terminates TLS at the pod or on the container or on the process. It has its own TLS servers, and it has to, because it does things. It makes decisions based on the contents of the handshake. Like it
when you say
verifies,
it makes decisions, you mean Ziti?
I mean,
or
Ziti authenticates the client with its certificate, or it will route the request based on the server name in the client hello. So it has to be able to read the TLS handshake. And most load balancers, including Caddy, many load balancers assume you want to terminate TLS, or they don't even give you an option to not terminate TLS. And Caddy's an example of that. It's great for a lot of things, but I've never found a way to pass through the TLS to the actual server.
Yeah, it runs in that whole thing of like man-in-the-middle attacks, and you go like, yeah, but don't tamper with this and all of that.
For sure. Yeah, well, and OpenZiti obviously being mutual TLS, if you attempt to terminate TLS anywhere along that path, it simply will not work.
Yep. And by design.
Correct. Yeah. Okay, so is that where the Helm port mappings comes from? Is it mostly all around dealing with TCP load balancers as opposed to, or ingress, or whatever the right word is that you want to put on that?
Well, I think that's part of it. But then, kind of going with the let's say sabbatical that I took of like, okay, let's give this a breather and whatnot, and then
during that sabbatical, did you just put it on the shelf and say I'll come back to it?
I had a lot of business to do. It just kind of was sat for a little bit, and the great thing was, in that particular time, you guys made it to version 1.0 stable. So I'm like, okay, like sort of that was like a reminder for me. I'm like, oh yeah, it's been bothering me. Time to kind of get back into it, and I felt like that was a good place to go. Okay, what are these? You just sort of reanalyze, like, what are the questions that I have hung up? What are the last things that I need to accomplish? And other than, just figuring out sort of through all the documentation of like, okay, well, how do you start from scratch? Because like in things like Docker Compose, all that's kind of done for you. But having a production ready cluster, different animal. And then other things of talking about the console and how to not have that exposed to the public, and the same kind of thing going back with Trafic. Not like when you like one of the things that we do is we have a cluster issuer for all TLS certificates, and Trafic is really, really good at just handling all of that with configs. But enter Ziti of, well, I don't want to do that. So
Right.
you have questions of, okay, I still want Trafic to handle the ingress in a way, but not. So this kind of harkens back to the, okay, so we need an ingress route TCP to be able to hand this off to this, to not interrupt it, to where it still works, but I still want a real certificate. Okay, how do I use a cluster issue with, like, you can see all of the stuff of, even if I have an engineer that needs access to the console, I still wanted to have a valid certificate. I don't want it barking of like, oh, you can't use this in this browser and so on and all of that. So that was more of the journey.
And so when you make those certificates, are you using your own CA, or are you using an OS verifiable CA?
So here's the thing.
Or is that tinfoil hat now?
Yeah, no, this is heavy. So the thing about it is I'm one of the psychopaths that we run our own DNS. So we actually use Power DNS, and this is with a cert manager webhook. So basically, when a certificate is issued, or not issued, but demanded, that hooks into cert manager. Cert manager goes, hey, I don't have this. Cert manager webhook, which is a brilliant project, and thank you to the man that made it, tells the master DNS server, hey, create this authentication record. That gets picked up. So it's a full-blown Acme certificate that's created on the fly, but all in-house.
So you're running your own CA.
Yeah.
All right. I was afraid you were going to tell me Let's Encrypt or something like that.
Yeah. Well, Let's Encrypt,
cool.
it is, pardon, no, as far as this particular part, no, we're actually using Let's Encrypt, but it's all completely tucked away. So none of this ever sees the light of day.
Very neat. Very neat.
Yeah.
And so we were talking before about automatic identities. Now you just mentioned an engineer. So obviously developers doing developer stuff on these services.
Well, the other thing is, like with our branch called the Sage, that's our executive advisory and fractional offering. So for any of our agents that need access to, if you think like diaries, calendars, being able to do video conferencing with clients, all of that kind of stuff, this goes into play with them as well. So for any of our communications, it's one of those, this is ultra tucked away where you go, great, you can have video conferencing, but we have something way more fun. So it's a lot of kind of mix of engineering and also sort of internal talent, and then also sort of external clients as well.
Well, that's really interesting. I think this is really fascinating stuff.
Well, I love that.
Yeah. Another thing that's been on my mind, and I see in your bio, but I see a handgun up there. Says in the bio that, what does it mean to be a gunsmith? You make your own weaponry?
Well, so here I can take this down and kind of explain a little bit. But like things that are fun on this particular one, believe it or not, this is actually 3D printed stainless.
Really neat.
Yeah. So when you go like, oh, well, we
possible.
can. Oh, no. Listen, if you want to get into it easy, like I'm not sponsored by them at all, but if you want to start prototyping with it, Shapeway is the Chinese company, but very, very low pricing. You can get things done in 316 stainless. So it's the process is fascinating. Unlike a say a resin 3D printer where it's just kind of a melty spool that does the thing, this is actually what's called SLM. So it's well, no, SSLM. It's selective laser sintering. So what happens is there's a bed of whatever metal dust, and then that gets swept over, and then a laser very precisely heats up, like, you know, we call it a micron layer or whatever, and then sweeps over, and then it melts and melts and melts as it builds up. So you don't have limitations with things like angle overhang, where you need supports and this and that, because it's all fused as it goes. But
and the material is quite sturdy.
316, you'll bend before it does. That's proper stuff. But yeah, like those are the kinds of things that we get into. But yeah, gunsmithing is fun.
That's very interesting. And so the Imperfektus itself is delivering its services using OpenZiti. It's delivering identities. Have you looked into, or do you use third-party CA for your identities, or are you happy to let the OpenZiti controller control?
I haven't had a need to go elsewhere. I feel like that would be a very specific use case to need to. You know, like I'm very much leave the simplicity to, like, if it's happy, if it's done, it does exactly what it says on the tin. Have you run into individuals saying, like, no, this isn't good enough?
Well, so a lot of times, I would say, generally speaking, you're running everything through OpenZiti, which is cool.
Sure.
Obviously, NetFoundry is the company that sponsors OpenZiti, pays my paycheck and Ken's paycheck. And so if you want to, you can always purchase an OpenZiti overlay network through NetFoundry.
Oh, yeah.
And if you were to do that, some people, more of us tinfoil hat wearer people, are more comfortable bringing their own PKI to that party.
Well, so I think the thing there is that you guys give the easy button. You know, it's one of those things where if you don't have the expertise or otherwise, you just go like, great, I'll just pay you. Wonderful service. Here we go.
For sure. And then you got somebody who can go fix it when you need to have it to go fix it. Absolutely.
And that's the thing. If you don't have the expertise or the manpower to be able to do it, then no, pay these guys.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. But the third party,
that's what it's there for.
The third-party CA is really neat, because if you were to purchase it from somebody, you can still use a certificate authority that you own and operate, and so your
I did remember reading
that,
actually.
And so your identities could be minted by your CA, and that's a really interesting feature. Also allows you to do things that probably aren't so relevant to you, such as IoT, are much more interesting, where you can mint the certificate and the key, put it onto your device, and then ship it into the field. And then when it turns on, the identity can just materialize in the OpenZiti overlay. And so that's nice too, because then for those use cases, you don't have the JWT or the QR code. Nobody's there to scan it.
Fair enough.
So it's interesting to use, but it might be something that you bake into an application. So if there are developers out there, your developers are interested, you might be able to go down that kind of path as well. Yeah,
no, I could see that on, like, even things like, well, not necessarily on a Handy, but because there's the Android tunnel on that. But no, that is something. Now you've given me more toys to play with, so thank you for that.
See, exactly. I mean, OpenZiti is nothing if not rife with toys to play with. That is absolutely
yeah,
the case.
Really
now I've just got like, what? Go ahead.
It's more of an alternative, not a better, worse.
Yeah, no, I'm just over here going like, oh, what kind of things could we do with the Raspberry Pi? Like, that's just all I have in my head now.
Yeah, for sure.
Like the default model is that you give Ziti a CA, and then as it's running, it issues certificates as Ziti identities. The other way to approach it is to keep the CA external. That's why we call it a third-party CA, because it's third-party from Ziti's perspective. Keep it external. Maybe you're managing it with some other software stack, and you're issuing those certificates, and then you've just configured Ziti to trust that CA.
Gotcha.
Cool.
Okay.
Well, that's really, I mean, I think this is great stuff. I really enjoy having users on to talk about Ziti.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
there anything in Ziti that's missing for you? Is it complete? What's on your wish list?
Um, yeah, I mean, as far as feature, as far as like I should say functionality, like does it do the thing? Absolutely. I think there are maybe some polish bits on like the UI. I've brought
Which
up like
UI?
one.
We have a few.
Yeah, well, I'll get there. So in the
All of them.
like no, again, this is battle tested.
Yeah.
I've put the wheels to the pavement, like for sure. But like in the Android UI, like small things like where to be able to tap or click on the buttons, it actually is underhung with the status bar. So you have to be like not on it, but underneath it and whatnot. Like those are like small annoyances. The same kind of thing. Actually, I opened an issue about it with the ZAC, the Ziti console. But like the little things of like inputting into certain fields that like don't update without moving away from a certain field. Like, and again, those are ticky details. But I think at this point, like really what I've seen is just small bits of UI polish, like just kind of the UX of like, well, does this feel easy or why is this buggy? And it can turn into bugs where if you go, oh, well, if I didn't click away from this, it didn't save the thing. If somebody using it, But
Yep.
as far as like the CLI, no, I mean that's done exactly what it's supposed to.
Well, that's great to hear. I'm glad. There'll
Yeah.
always be polish to put on,
Always.
always. So that's great. Well, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you were eager to talk about?
I mean, no, I mean we've touched
Covered a
on
bunch of ground.
I mean, yeah, definitely that. As far as from my end, like we've kind of talked about the Sage. That's our most fun, like kind of public facing thing at the moment. Other things that we do have in the works.
Put a link right here.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, the things that we have coming up, like I've elaborated on the envelope, but that actually coincides with something I haven't even that you guys are getting the first taste, but it's called the Kingdom, and what this is our it's an exclusive let's say court, or however you'd like to call it, just a gathering of executives that this does play into Ziti, because if you think about how do we have men from all four corners of the earth that want to do business together, that want to engage, that want to travel, that needs to be extremely tinfoil hatty secure, and that again coincides with transport and travel. So that's a big one, and it's still being planned out. Like we've actually done a bit of shopping for aircraft, kind of looking and seeing what need to be acquired and what fits us best. But yeah, like, good busy.
Well, let me know when you're operating Ziti from 30,000 feet. That'll be fun.
It'll be there. Like I assure you. Like even if you think about like how do you do like onboard entertainment and things, like you go like, oh great. If you have like a media center and you go, yeah, I'd like to tap this into insert network here, or like tap this cluster, I'd still like that all to be secure and in-house. And like, when we talk bespoke, I mean, like I'm making the carpet from scratch. Like that's where we get down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah, very neat. Very neat.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Well, I'd like to continue answering the first question that we posed to you, Meade, about how you're using it. So just as a quick sketch, do I have this right? You have a Kubernetes cluster.
Sure.
You deployed the Ziti controller. You deployed the Ziti router. So they're running there, and you're publishing their TLS servers with the traffic ingress controller.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And at some point during our back and forth, you had also mentioned Metal LB, which is a great Kubernetes-enabled load balancer intended for bare metal Kubernetes age nodes. Clint is hinting something.
Link. This is where the link goes to Metal LB.
Yes.
Metal LB.
Click
it's a
I really wanted
Metal
to.
LB.
I wanted to appear through my hands.
I like it. Oh goodness.
It's metal. And
Hmm.
well, did you end up using that for anything?
Yeah, no, MetalLB for anything that actually needs publicly exposed or like need a guaranteed external IP address, it's perfect for that. So, for example, with the Ziti controller, that actually is publicly exposed because it needs to be via MetalLB. So all you do, it's just handled with annotations. So you just you can do it one of two ways, really. You can have either explicit like one-offs, or you can have pools that you can just pull from dynamically. So if you say like, oh, I'll give it a /16 block or whatever, and you say, great, take this and just whatever needs a load balancer, give it
Yep.
one of these, at will. I run a lot more explicit because, again, most of our stuff is not publicly exposed. So I don't need large swaths of pools of like, oh, here, here's a 255 address pool and just go with it. The services that we have exposed are much less than the ones that we have internally ingressed.
Okay. So you have one controller.
Mm.
We have high availability on the way, but you have a single controller right now.
Hmm.
We
Yeah,
haven't
that's
gotten
exciting
general
stuff.
availability yet for HA, but it's on the way.
Do you
And
have an
how many?
approximate timeline? I'll put that forward.
I think it'll probably be GA this coming year, for
Oh,
sure.
cool. Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, it feels hot to me, so I'm working on it. There's several people working on implementate on that. But
Mm.
back to your cluster, you had
Yeah.
just one router. Did you go with a pair of routers? And how
So
did you
it's
configure
still,
those? Because they can do several different jobs at the same time.
yeah, as far as the router, at the moment, we haven't had a need for more than one. But
Okay.
what I have is plans for when we uh, expanding data centers, basically. So what that'll have is, the kind of controller router pair on, say, like the master, and then for any other additional separate clusters, that way those can just be linked together with, and even access things like you just give it a kube control file. You go, great, I can access this particular cluster over here, or this like triplet, that kind of stuff. But that's more in the nearish future as far as adding on multiple backend locations.
Okay. So that takes care of the basics of how you have installed and published
Sure.
the ZD stack itself, like the
Hmm.
backplane. But what about the workloads? Like ZD has Edge SDKs, which let you either embed ZD as a library into your app so it
Hmm.
doesn't need a proxy, or you can use ZD as a proxy. So those are the
Okay.
workloads. Are the workloads running inside the cluster or outside the cluster or both?
So here's where I'll poke you guys, and you're welcome to go, oh my goodness, he brought up that R word. Now, you may or may not know, but I am weirdly technical, and I've worked on the Rust compiler to stabilize const.fn. From what I understand, you guys don't yet have a Rust SDK,
We do
correct?
not yet have a Rust SDK, and I
See,
don't
and
know
I'll
that
poke you.
no one is murmuring about actually like seriously making one yet, as far as I
and
know.
and that's okay. Like I've seen a little bit. I haven't delved into it a great deal because we haven't needed it yet. But it's one of those. If I needed to, we could, do the FFI wrapper with C. It's not as clean as I'd like it, but it's one of those. If I absolutely needed to use it, like today, we could. But yeah, that's one of those things where like our services, like things that are bespoke, that's all written in Rust. So yeah, I'll push that on you.
Well, Rust
Yeah,
is it does come up. It does come up.
It's a real animal.
Yeah, it doesn't come up all the time, but it does come up once in a while, and
Hmm.
and so there's some desire for it
Sure.
amongst the team as well as outside of the team.
Hmm.
I don't
yeah,
know. Go ahead,
it's
Ken.
neat, but I mean, it's potentially powerful as soon as you have a reason for it to exist. I think it will. So that's why I'm asking about the workloads, whether they're like you installed ZD for a reason. You put it out there, and
Sure.
it's doing some work, right? So you must have
Sure.
workloads either in the cluster or outside. I was just wondering because there's a few things that we might want to touch on about
So what do you
running
mean by
ZD
workloads as far as
ZD
ZT?
enabled workloads inside the cluster. There's some different techniques for that.
This part I may not be familiar with the terminology. What do you mean as far as ZT workloads, I suppose?
I mean, you've got a client server relationship shuttling some bytes back and forth. That's a
Sure.
service, and you can describe that service with a ZD service, and then authorize it for the traffic to flow one direction or the other. So a workload, I'm just using as an umbrella term for services wherever they might be deployed. These are usually this is just probably a server running in somewhere like Kubernetes.
Sure. I may be misunderstanding, but I'll try and fumble through. Are you picturing something different than like what we've talked about, like with an ingress controller?
No, a workload is just some service running inside a Kubernetes land. And then
gotcha.
a ZD workload is just a workload that you're using ZD to access. So that's all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What kind of stuff are you publishing with ZD as ZD services?
Gotcha.
So are they for humans or for robots or both?
A mixture of both. So yeah, we could even talk about, human accessible services, and then even things like you talk about metrics endpoints and you go, well, what are we doing with that? How do we make sure that everything is, the lights are green? So definitely a blend of both.
And do you monitor your OpenZD overlay? Are you?
I monitor anything I can put my hands on. It's one of those things of, I've been in this particular space for long enough to know that I would much rather know if something is heading sideways ahead of time rather than later. You have that thing of like everything's red. You go, why? What did you tell me anything about it at all? And anyone who's dealt with Linux systems, otherwise you go, well, when you have hard crashes and all of that kind of stuff, you go, it's one of three things. It's either CPU's overdrawn by too much, ran out of RAM, or the disk is full. And if you have all of that kind of stuff where you go, well, let's make sure that everything stays happy, and let me know if it starts trending the wrong way. There's no other way to do things. I can't preach that one enough of like, yes, kids, monitor your things.
For sure. I totally would.
Do you have any, for the things that you're publishing with ZD, there's typically one or more clients and one or more servers that are participating in that flow, right? So do you have any ZD clients inside the cluster, or is it only servers inside the cluster? That is like microservices talk to each other, so one of them would be a client.
That's all handled internally. So it's basically ZT is just kind of the portal, the gateway into that access.
Okay, so ZD is serving as a reverse proxy inside the cluster for the cluster services. You're publishing cluster services via ZD.
Inside. Yeah, exactly.
To other places, right? Like the services are being consumed elsewhere outside the cluster.
Well, yeah, you can't. Again, going back to future plans, like if you think, say we have, like a Proxmox setup, and you think, okay, we have a HA setup with K3S, for example. And you go, great, I'd like to be able to link like a master node here with a secondary node in a different physical location. And you go, how do you do it? Well, it historically would be badly done with VPNs, but now you have the ability with ZT to be able to chain those two things, and it works seamlessly. So that's like one example.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key insights about ZD, just in general at the highest level, is that while we were comparing it earlier to WireGuard and making the point that WireGuard is just it's just one piece of the solution. It's just the transport, it's layer 3 transport, whereas ZD is giving you not only the transport, but that full vertical integration of authorization.
Yeah, it's seamless. And that's the thing that I really enjoyed about it, is like not only being lightweight, and, we can talk about programming languages and all of that. Go is fairly slim. But that's one of those.
Not in binary size terms.
No, I mean in footprint. But like I'll play the Rust card again. Go have fun with static linking, and you go like, great, this is different. But it's it's one of those things where the same kind of, oh, actually, this brings up a really good point. Something that I don't know if you guys are aware of, because I've done a ridiculous amount of research on it, like stupid amount of research with regards to like MTU size and things like that, trying to optimize, network flow. And one thing that came up that I noticed is if you use like, and this is any, because there are multiple WireGuard clients like for Android. This is a really, really specific thing. And hats off to you guys, and you'll understand why in a moment. If you are connected on Android, and like this is on Graphene OS, like, yeah, so, very, very slim, extremely efficient operating system. And if you use WireGuard to connect to a tunnel and all of that, it will less than half. I think it's roughly, you only get about a third of the bandwidth. And this is on, it doesn't matter. Yeah, no, it has nothing to do with it. Like you can look up like, oh, I mean, like I've tried the magic combination or anything. It doesn't matter. You can get it less bad, but it's never the full like the full pipe. It's never that. So yeah, you go like, oh, should we be running MTU like 1900? Try 16, try 1320. It doesn't matter. It's never going to work correctly. And you guys feel free to test this. It's true. But what I found is that Ziti does not suffer from this. So what if you compare, like if you like pull up like speed test, it doesn't, any kind of bandwidth testing service, and you can do this if it's connected to Wi-Fi or mobile data. It doesn't matter. If you're on Wi-Fi and say like, you're on like Wi-Fi 6 and all of that kind, and you're supposed to be getting like, call it like 500 megabits down, you'll probably get like 2. If you're using WireGuard. I'm not exaggerating. So you guys have like a project of like, I think you may have a case study like of why would you use Ziti, and you go like, because their stuff's slow, our stuff's fast. And it's not, I'm not joking. This is, I've done, again, a stupendous amount of research on why would you use it. But yeah, it doesn't matter if it's mobile data or Wi-Fi, Ziti just performs. And well, that's a real thing.
That is so nice to hear, and you should write a blog post about it, because because a lot of times a third party doing third-party research is much more valuable than us doing it.
No, and I forgot about it until just now, and I'm like, oh, that's one of those points that I've had like over the past year knocking around in the mind and going like, yeah, no, that's a real problem.
Yeah, that would be fantastic, and would be happy to promote whatever blog you decide to write if you decide to write one.
Sure. No, that's a great idea.
It is a little long into the tooth here, and so I wanted to wrap this up because it's been a good conversation. It's been a lot of fun, and again, this is Imperfektus with Meade Kincke, and Ken and Clint. And Ziti TV, we haven't, and in case you notice, I'm going to premiere this. This should be a YouTube premiere at some point where it shows up live. So this won't be live. Again, remember, it's not live. So if you got this far into it, you probably won't be surprised it's not live. But I didn't put a date on this one. I did put December 2024 because I do hope that I'll get it out in December. But if it's in January, that's just how it's
either way, you'll have something wonderful to watch.
That's right. That's right. Fantastic. Well, Meade, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about how you use OpenZiti. Really fascinating stuff. I'm sure we'll see you in the forums when something else goes wrong.
Well, let's hope that's done.
Yeah. Well, let's hope it's done. I don't know. Maybe another 1 year long giant Discourse post is in our future.
Oh,
but
goodness.
Maybe not right
I think we've had enough. That's goodness. But yeah, if any of you definitely go have a perusal. There's a lot of information in that thread.
Yeah, do feel free to start a new topic. There might be a lot of gravity.
Actually,
just from the sheer mass of the old post, it's pulling you back
nuts.
in. But
well, no, it's true. It's kind of a collapsed star. But actually, I've started up another one. This one's a little bit more, I'll say, tricky. And this is dealing with things like, how do you share network printers and why can't I access them? And by the way, this is a fun thing. It doesn't work in WireGuard either. I've tested that too. Oh. So there's something weird, and I think from kind of like instinct, I think it has to do with broadcast. But there's something, it's something weird, but there's something that even Ziti doesn't Like even if you give it a network block and all of that, it just goes, I can't see it. It has access to it. Like I've created services and all of that to test it, but there's something weird going on where that network access is
You
not.
might have to force it to use
there.
a specific protocol on a predictable port rather than letting it go through its whole discovery algorithm.
Yeah, I bet that sounds way less stubborn than me. Like, how do I make it boring and easy? How do we do that? Like with a lot of work.
All right. Well, what a great conversation. Again, thank you so much, fellas, for showing up.
Indeed.
And we'll see you everybody next time.
Great.
Bye.
Cheers all.
Thanks, Glenn.
All right, cool.